Lake Champlain is home to one of North America's greatest mysteries. Join small-town monsters as we explore America's Loch Ness, following researchers, listening to eyewitnesses, and examining the evidence. This is On the Trail of Champ. Nestled between the U.S. states of New York and Vermont, as well as the Canadian province of Quebec, lies a massive body of water. But this is no ordinary lake. This is Lake Champlain. A place of endearing beauty and natural wonder. A place filled with rich history, but also a place riddled with mystery and intrigue. For centuries, people inhabiting this area have reported the presence of something unknown in the lake. An unidentified creature rumored to be much larger than any known species in the lake. The Lake Champlain monster is affectionately known as Champ or Champy by the locals and has been seen hundreds of times over the centuries. Typically described as being anywhere from 10 to 30 feet in length, with a dark brown, green, or black scaly color. The creature is purported to closely resemble some sort of long-necked aquatic reptile from the time of the dinosaurs. One of only a few lakes that flows northbound, modern-day Lake Champlain is 120 miles long, 12.2 miles wide at its widest, with a maximum depth of 427 feet. This makes Lake Champlain one of the largest freshwater lakes in the entire United States. Lake Champlain was first discovered by Europeans in 1609 as French explorer Samuel de Champlain made his way through the area. The lake was thus named after him, but the history of the lake itself reaches much further back in time. Modern-day Lake Champlain traces its origins to a time when it was actually part of a much larger body of water known as the Champlain Sea, which was an arm of the Atlantic Ocean. Lake Champlain was but a fjord in this sea, which covered much of the Canadian provinces of Quebec and Ontario, as well as parts of New York State and Vermont. The sea was present due to water from massive glaciers that engulfed much of Canada. The Champlain Sea was host to a variety of marine life, including mammals like whales and seals.
So the Charlotte whale was found in 1850 by some railroad workers, and that is a marine mammal, a whale. So the time of the Champlain Sea, 13,000 years ago, which was about the time of the end of the last ice age, is actually a really short amount of time in the history of life here on Earth. And it's believed that those saltwater animals are what brought people to this area for the first time because they were hunting those animals. And those animals got pushed back out as the freshwater started to replace the saltwater.
Today, there are 90 species of fish in modern Lake Champlain, making it one of the most biodiverse lakes in North America.
My name is Scott Martis. I've been an investigator of the Lake Champlain monster for the last 25 years. I used to live here in Vermont for 18 years. My initial visit to Lake Champlain to begin investigating was November of 1992. I moved here in April 1994 and lived here till December of 2011. I moved to Florida because I met my wife, but I've still come back every summer to investigate. I've been here every summer since 2013, so I've been at this a long time. My speculative hypothesis regarding the simplest answer to what may be going on here, and that's assuming, and this is a big assumption, that what people are describing in their eyewitness reports, and I include myself in that because I had a sighting in 1994 of something that I believe was one of these animals, And if the best video and photographic evidence is correct, my speculative hypothesis that somehow some sort of moderately long-necked plesiosaur managed to survive beyond their presumed extinctions in the oceans for millions of years. Then a small colony or group of these plesiosaurs came into the Champlain Sea and were subsequently trapped when the land rose and cut off the marine influence, gradually became freshwater and became modern-day Lake Champlain. And there's been a small colony of them living and dying in the lake ever since. Now that's a speculative hypothesis. The idea of some kind of plesiosaur or prehistoric whale existing here is not that far-fetched, because some of the fishes that the prehistoric Mesozoic marine reptiles and the early whales ate are thriving in this lake. Like gars and bowfins, sturgeons, these are all contemporaries of the dinosaurs. So, you know, it's not that far-fetched to imagine something like that. But imagining it and making it real are two different things.
While it is disputed when exactly the first recorded sighting of the Champ creature occurred, Native American tribes on both sides of the lake had their fair share of folklore surrounding a mysterious serpent in the water. For the Mohawk, it was called Anyarakoa, or Great Snake. For the Western Abenaki, it was Pitaskag, or Tataskak, an underwater horned serpent. Several interesting petroglyphs have been pointed to as possible evidence of Native American depictions of Champ or similar creatures. One such petroglyph was discovered in 1995, not far from the shores of the Canadian section of Lake Champlain. In 1794, Western Abenaki's petroglyphs were discovered on the West River, just about 80 miles southeast of Lake Champlain's southernmost point. The petroglyphs purport to show strange serpent-like creatures, including one with a long neck and appendages. Whether these peculiar petroglyphs have anything to do with the mystery of Lake Champlain is yet to be determined.
My name's Katie Elizabeth. I am the president and founder of Champ Search, an organization that's dedicated to proving the existence, studying, and most importantly, protecting the unique animals that inhabit Lake Champlain. I started getting into this phenomenon when I was around 7 years old. I was watching an episode of Unsolved Mysteries, and I saw the famous Sandra Mancy photo that was taken in 1977. And I said to my mom, "Oh my gosh, there's a dinosaur in Vermont. I want to go see it." And then later on in my life, I was 21. It was 2012. I ended up coming up to the lake. Well, I believe that these animals are a reptile and also have amphibious traits. The main reason for that is the many eyewitness accounts that I've gathered over the years of my research. I've heard of people seeing them sunbathing on the beach, which is a thing that reptiles do. Basically, they do this to sustain vitamin D. Also, there's been reports of eye shine in the marsh and out on the lake when a light is shown upon them. That's also indicative of a nocturnal animal. American alligators, crocodiles, things like that, they give off this eye shine. And it's just amazing to see the similarities between, you know, a known reptile that has survived millions of years that is still here compared to the traits that these animals have as well. You know, you don't see these animals coming up for air all the time. So it's possible that these animals breathe through their skin. They have like slimy skin on some of their body, and then they also have these knobs on their back and on their neck. And that is the other part of the reptilian traits that this animal has.
The Revolutionary War brought more people to the Lake Champlain area. In fact, Lake Champlain played a crucial role during the war. Various naval battles were fought between the rebelling Americans and British forces on the lake. The lake was a key strategic area that both sides wished to control. The British retained control of most of the lake following the war, but stayed posted mostly in the northern sections of the lake. While there were reports of strange serpent-like sightings during the colonial and revolutionary period around Lake Champlain, it wasn't until local newspapers began reporting on such phenomenon that sightings were being recorded. The first such published report of a monster on Lake Champlain came from a New York publication known as the Public Advertiser, which in 1809 wrote, "Lake Champlain, a monster has lately made its appearance on the waters of the lake." The next reported account of a monster on the lake came in 1819. It was reported in the Plattsburgh Republican publication that a massive creature had been spotted by residents near Bulwugga Bay in Port Henry, New York.
And what's really interesting is if you read that story, it reads as kind of satirical. And so at that time, people had satire too. And so there were people who believed in Champ, and there are some people who maybe were making light of people believing in Champ. And so I think it's important to really look at the evidence to distinguish between people who really saw something and believed that they saw something, and maybe people who were having a little fun at the time. And we see a similar thing with Samuel D. Champlain. A lot of people quote these records of Samuel D. Champlain seeing a monster in Lake Champlain. And that's often misquoted. He saw something that was 5 foot long that was probably definitely a long-nosed gar.
My name is William Dranginis. I've been interested in cryptozoology, the study of unknown animals, since 1995, when I had a Bigfoot sighting in Virginia. We were 100 feet away, 75 feet away actually, and I saw the creature clearly. That really sparked my interest, knowing that these are flesh and blood animals, creatures. So it was about almost 10 years later, 12 years later, I got interested in the Champ creature at Lake Champlain. I found it interesting because I contacted some eyewitnesses, worked with Scott Martis up here at the lake, and actually talking to the witnesses is a really great thing. They have the same energy that I have after I had my Bigfoot sighting. That in itself is key, because there are people that hoax sightings, things like that, but when you meet someone that had that same energy that you had, and it doesn't matter if it's Bigfoot or Loch Ness or Champ here, it's an energy everyone has, and you could sense that energy. So by interviewing some of the people around the lake here, it really got me into it, that there could possibly be a creature here.
Together with Scott Martis, they make up the Martis-Dranginis Lake Champlain research team. It was the 1870s that would bring the monster of Lake Champlain into the mainstream lexicon. Back then, it was referred to as the Champlain sea serpent. Whitehall, New York sits at the southern end of the lake. It was in the small hamlet of Dresden, New York, bordering the lake, that in July of 1873, a group of railroad workers reported seeing a 20-foot-long serpent with large teeth swimming for about a quarter of a mile. The Whitehall Times wrote an article about the encounters, and panic began to spread. Later that month, a steamboat reportedly hit the serpent and nearly capsized near Fort Ticonderoga. The reports soon were printed nationwide, and they even attracted the attention of noted showman P.T. Barnum, who issued a dispatch stating, "I hereby offer $50,000 for the hide of the great Champlain sea serpent to add to my Mammoth's World Fair show." As a result, armed hunting parties began scouring the lake in search of the creature's remains, but none were found, and Barnum's reward was never handed out.
The general consensus opinion among mainstream zoologists is that there is no strange animal in Lake Champlain. You know, whatever it is extremely elusive. There are a whole host of known prehistoric survivors in the lake, I believe, have a place in explaining the more marginal champ sightings. The ones where people are given a detailed description of something with a long neck and a humpback that's very large, in excess of 6 feet, that obviously will not do. But the only thing that's ever gonna make a difference with mainstream science and put this animal in the zoology books, if it exists, is a biological specimen of some type. You have to break through that wall to make it legitimate. I believe they're here, but I can't prove it. Eyewitness testimony, no matter how persuasive it is and no matter how consistent it is not acceptable evidence in the science of zoology for evidence of a new animal species. You've got to have a biological specimen.
In 1889, the Plattsburgh Sentinel offered $1,000 for the capture, dead or alive, of the Champlain sea serpent after renewed sightings. The monster reappeared in 1915 in a New York Times report about multiple witnesses seeing a 40-foot-long creature trapped in the shallows of Bulwaga Bay. Accounts of sightings were published sporadically in 1929, 1939, 1943, and 1961. In 1971, Joseph Sarzinski formed the Lake Champlain Phenomena Investigation, cataloging many of the reports in the modern era.
Well, I've been studying the animals for, over 30 years, but actually ChampQuest has been in existence since 1992. The late 70s, early 80s, there was a bunch of sightings, and then it slowed down towards the mid 80s, late 80s, but then from 1992 to 1996, there was a bunch of sightings. There were just, one summer we had 35, wow. And there was more yet that we had heard of, but just hadn't been able to track down. Made up a quick sighting report for them.
This goes back about over 20 years ago, even before they named this creature Champ. I was fishing up there in the late fall, and as I was sitting there, I heard a splash, and then I saw the creature. It was no more than 20-some feet approximately from the boat. What I saw from it was approximately the size of a telephone pole. The coloring onto it was very similar to that of a bullhead or of an eel, and then it went to more or less a whitish underneath it. I saw the way this creature swam. It did not swim in a serpentine type of motion with its tail going from side to side. It went in a motion of a coil type where it propelled itself downward at a very fast rate of speed.
Champ sightings have been going on at a fairly regular pace since then, with sightings reported nearly each year. However, the question remains, if Champ exists, what could it be?